Eli Mercer loved exploring forgotten places. At 26 years old, he spent most of his time hiking through the Appalachian Mountains, taking photos of abandoned towns, old churches, and places people had stopped talking about years ago. For almost 4 years, Eli traveled different parts of the Appalachian Trail, searching for places hidden deep in the woods. But in November of 2024, he found a place that should have stayed hidden forever. And according to people living near Damascus, Virginia, some places in the mountains never really disappear. They wait. Eli arrived in Damascus late on a cold Thursday evening. The town looked quiet and normal. Small diners, old shops, hikers stopping for supplies before getting back on the trail. Eli checked into a cheap motel and spent the night looking at maps on his laptop. A few weeks earlier, someone had sent him an email about an abandoned settlement hidden near Iron Mountain Trail. The person claimed hikers sometimes found old stone buildings deep in the forest, but the place didn't exist on any official map. The email also included blurry photos, broken cabins, an old church bell, and one picture that really bothered Eli. It showed a small cemetery. Every gravestone was broken, except one. That single grave marker said, "Don't answer them after dark." No name, no date, just those words. Eli couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, he packed his camera gear and drove toward the Iron Mountain section of the Appalachian Trail. The sky was gray, and thick clouds covered the mountains. At a small gas station, an older man warned Eli about bad weather coming later that night. Then the man asked, "You hiking up there alone?" Eli nodded. The man stayed quiet for a second before speaking again. "If you hear somebody calling your name out there..." He stopped. Eli waited for him to finish. The old man looked nervous. Then he quietly said, "Make sure you know who's calling." The hike started normally. Dead leaves covered the trail, and cold air moved through the trees as Eli walked deeper into the mountains. Around noon, he noticed something strange. A wooden trail marker nailed to a tree, but it wasn't an official trail sign. The wood looked old and burned around the edges. Carved into it was a strange symbol. 3 circles connected by one straight line. Under the symbol were faded words. Hollow Creek Settlement. Eli checked his map. The place wasn't there. That should have been enough reason to leave. Instead, he followed the narrow path leading away from the main trail. At first, the trail looked abandoned, but after 20 minutes, Eli noticed something strange. The path was too clean. Broken branches, fresh footprints, leaves pushed aside recently. Something had been moving through these woods. Then he saw the footprints clearly. Bare human footprints. In the cold of November, pressed deep into the mud, leading downhill. Eli raised his voice, expecting a response from somewhere deeper in the trees. But the forest felt wrong. The usual sounds of the mountains had vanished completely. No rustling leaves, no distant animal movement, not even the creaking of branches overhead. It was the kind of unnatural stillness that made him suddenly aware of how alone he really was. About an hour later, Eli reached the hollow. The place looked unreal. Old stone foundations covered the ground. Broken cabins leaned sideways under thick vines and moss. Rusted tools lay half buried in the dirt. It looked like people had disappeared in the middle of their lives. At the center of the settlement stood a church, or what was left of one. The roof had partly collapsed, and black wooden beams stuck up into the sky. Eli slowly lifted his camera. Then he heard a voice. "Help me." It sounded like a woman, very faint, very far away. Eli froze. "Hello," he shouted. No answer. Then the voice came again.
Help me!
"Please, help me." This time it sounded closer, coming from inside the church. Every part of Eli wanted to leave, but curiosity pulled him forward. He slowly walked toward the church. The front doors hung open. Inside smelled damp and rotten. Broken benches covered the floor. Old books lay scattered everywhere. And near the front of the church, someone was standing there. A woman, facing away from him. Long dark hair, thin white dress, bare feet covered in mud. Eli felt his stomach tighten. "Are you okay?" he asked. The woman didn't move, didn't answer. Then slowly, she pointed toward a basement door beside the altar. The door stood open. Darkness filled the stairs below, and from underneath, voices, lots of voices, whispering together. Eli couldn't understand the words, but they sounded scared. Then the woman finally spoke. "They're still down there." Her voice sounded strange, like several people speaking at once. Eli slowly stepped backward. The woman tilted her head. "You came after dark." Then she started turning toward him. Eli never fully saw her face, because the second she moved, the whispers below the church stopped. Complete silence. Then something huge moved under the floor. A loud scraping sound echoed beneath him, like claws dragging across stone. Eli ran. He burst outside into heavy rain. The storm had started suddenly. Behind him, the church bell began ringing loudly, again and again, even though there was no bell in the tower anymore. The sound echoed through the mountains. Then the screaming started. Not whispers, real screams. Dozens of people screaming from underneath the church. Eli ran between the broken buildings, slipping through mud and wet grass. Then he saw lights in the trees, lanterns, several of them, moving slowly through the forest around him. Tall figures stepped out from the darkness, carrying old oil lanterns. At first, Eli thought they were people searching for him. Then lightning flashed, and he realized something was wrong. The figures moved strangely, jerky movements like puppets. One figure lifted its lantern. Its face looked burnt black. Its eyes were completely white. Eli stumbled backward. Then the figure spoke, but the voice sounded exactly like Eli. "You shouldn't have answered." Suddenly, all the lanterns went dark. Everything around him disappeared into darkness. Eli ran uphill through the forest. Rain slammed against the trees. Branches scratched his arms and face. Several times he heard footsteps behind him, matching his speed perfectly. But every time he looked back, nothing was there. Then his flashlight died. Darkness covered everything, and somewhere nearby, he heard his own voice whisper, "Eli." He froze. The voice came again, closer this time. "Eli, over here." It sounded exactly like him. Then another voice joined in, a woman crying softly, "Please don't leave us down there." Soon dozens of voices started repeating his name from every direction in the woods. Eli ran harder than he ever had in his life. Then suddenly, he burst back onto the Appalachian Trail. Moonlight shined through the clouds. The storm was gone. No rain, no wind, nothing. Eli turned around. The path leading to the settlement had disappeared. Only thick forest remained. No trail, no opening, nothing. By sunrise, Eli finally made it back to Damascus, covered in mud, shaking badly. The motel owner looked shocked when he saw him. "Where the hell have you been?" Eli frowned. "What are you talking about? You checked out 3 days ago." Eli felt sick. 3 days. That couldn't be possible. He had only entered the hollow yesterday afternoon. The motel owner looked worried. We almost called search and rescue. Eli quickly checked his camera. Most of the photos were ruined. Only static covered the screen, except for one image, a photo taken inside the church. At first it looked blurry. Then Eli zoomed in. The woman near the altar wasn't alone. Hundreds of faces stared out from the darkness below the floorboards. Men, women, children, burned faces, crying faces, reaching upward. And in the corner of the photo stood another figure, tall, burned skin, white eyes, holding a lantern. Eli deleted the photo immediately. But sometimes, late at night, the image still appears on his phone for a split second before disappearing again. Months later, Eli finally learned the truth about Hollow Creek settlement. Old records in Bristol, Tennessee told the story. In 1911, a fire destroyed a small religious community hidden near Iron Mountain. Official reports blamed the fire on an accident during a storm, but local stories said something much worse happened. People believed the preacher of the church had gone insane. He convinced the people living there that the end of the world was coming. One night, during a church service, he locked everyone inside the building. Then he burned it down. Nobody survived. After that, hikers started reporting strange things in the area. Voices calling from the woods. Lantern lights moving through trees at night. People hearing family members calling their names from deep in the forest. Eventually, the settlement disappeared from maps completely. Like somebody wanted the place erased. Eli never went back to Iron Mountain. He stopped exploring abandoned places forever. Friends noticed he changed after that trip. He barely talks anymore. He keeps blackout curtains over every window in his apartment. And no matter what happens, he never answers voices at night. Because sometimes, right before he falls asleep, he still hears something calling his name from deep inside the mountains, using his own voice. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting for you on Tales After Midnight. Visit the channel and subscribe. The link is in the description.